Think of the ground beneath you not as a solid mass, but as a living, breathing skin. To the casual observer, a forest floor is a quiet expanse of fallen leaves, damp moss, and silent earth. But if you could peel back the crust of the world, if you could accelerate your perception to see the microscopic vibrations traveling through the loam, you would realize that you are standing atop a sprawling, hyperconnected civilization. Beneath your feet, a silent empire is in constant motion. This is the realm of the termites. They are the ghosts of the soil, an invisible presence that exerts a profound influence on the very chemistry of our planet. While we build our cities of steel and glass, reaching upward toward the sun, these architects have mastered a different direction: the descent. They exist in the interstitial spaces, the tiny voids between grains of sand, the microscopic fissures in decaying wood, the dark, pressurized veins of the subsoil. But don't mistake their invisibility for insignificance. While most creatures interact with the world through sight or sound, the termite empire operates on a sensory plane we can barely comprehend. They are masters of the tactile and the chemical. In the absolute darkness of their subterranean corridors, vision is an evolutionary luxury they simply do not need. Instead, they navigate a world of chemical landscapes. To a termite, a scent isn't just a smell. It is a map, a command, and a history book all at once. They move through a dense fog of pheromones, reading the air to detect the presence of a predator, the location of a new food source, or the urgent signal of a structural breach. Scientifically, their impact is even more staggering than their numbers suggest. We often think of soil as a static medium, but termites are its primary engineers. Through a process known as bioturbation, they are constantly churning the earth, mixing organic matter with mineral soil. This isn't just simple digging. It is a sophisticated form of nutrient cycling. By creating these vast, intricate networks of tunnels, they increase the soil's porosity, allowing oxygen and water to penetrate deep into the earth, fueling the very root systems of the forests above. Without this invisible labor, the terrestrial life we see, the towering trees and the lush vegetation, would likely suffocate in stagnant, compacted earth. They are also the masters of the hidden economy. They occupy a unique ecological niche as the primary recyclers of cellulose, the most abundant organic polymer on Earth. While most animals struggle to break down the tough, fibrous walls of plant cells, the termite empire has perfected the art of digestion, turning the unbreakable into the building blocks of life. As we begin this journey, we must shift our perspective. We must stop looking at the world as a collection of distinct objects and start seeing it as a layered reality. Beneath the stillness of the meadow and the concrete of the sidewalk, there is a rhythmic, pulsing energy. A vast, coordinated, and ancient intelligence is working in the dark. The empire is here. It is beneath you. And its story is one of the most uninterrupted, complex, and vital sagas in the history of life on Earth. But if this empire is a single, pulsing organism, how does such a massive, dark world maintain its order? The answer lies not in a central command, but in a profound biological surrender, the division of the self. In the termite world, the individual is a myth. There is only the caste. To understand the termite is to understand a radical departure from the concept of the individual. Within the colony, life is dictated by a rigid, genetically driven hierarchy where your destiny is written in your very anatomy. This is not merely a social structure. It is a biological mandate. At the foundation of this civilization are the workers. They are the unsung, sightless engine of the empire. Lacking both the weaponry of the soldier and the reproductive organs of the royalty, the worker is a creature of pure utility. They are often pale, soft-bodied, and vulnerable, yet they perform the Herculean tasks of the colony, foraging, nursing the larvae, and maintaining the complex humidity of the tunnels. But there is a hidden complexity to their labor. Workers are not a static group. they possess a remarkable degree of plasticity. Through a process of phenotypic plasticity, the colony can actually shift its workforce, reprogramming certain individuals to take on different roles based on the immediate needs of the collective. They are the ultimate generalists, the living hands of a subterranean giant. But where there is labor, there must be protection. Enter the soldiers. If the workers are the hands, the soldiers are the shield and the sword. Evolution has sculpted them into specialized killing machines. Their bodies are heavily armored with thickened exoskeletons, and their heads are often disproportionately large, housing massive muscles to operate their weaponry. In many species, these weapons are not just mandibles, but specialized chemical sprayers. When a breach occurs, these soldiers can undergo a violent physiological event, rupturing their own frontal glands to spray a sticky, toxic secretion that can incapacitate an invading ant in seconds. This is a terrifying biological trade-off. The soldier is so specialized for combat that they are often incapable of feeding themselves. They are entirely dependent on the workers to pass food to them through trophallaxis, a ritual of mouth-to-mouth liquid exchange that keeps the army fed and the chemical signals flowing. Yet even the most efficient workers and the most ferocious soldiers exist for a singular purpose: the preservation of the royal lineage. At the heart of the labyrinth sits the monarchy. Unlike the fleeting lives of the workers, the king and queen represent a biological anomaly, an almost eternal presence. The queen, in particular, is a marvel of evolutionary engineering. Once she has mated, her body undergoes a staggering metamorphosis. Her abdomen expands to hundreds of times its original size, transforming her into a living, egg-laying machine. A single queen can produce thousands of eggs every single day, a relentless biological output that sustains the millions of lives beneath the soil. Beside her sits the king, a role often overlooked by the casual observer, but one that is vital to the genetic continuity of the empire. Together, they are the anchors of the colony's history. They are the keepers of the lineage, the biological origin point from which every worker, every soldier, and every tunnel will eventually flow. In this empire, there is no room for the ego. There is only the relentless, beautiful, and brutal efficiency of the caste. But if the caste system provides the structure of this empire, a more profound mystery lies within its very fuel. How does a creature with such a fragile, soft body consume the most stubborn, impenetrable substance on Earth? To the untrained eye, a fallen log is a monument of wood, a dense, fortress-like structure of cellulose and lignin. To a termite, however, it is a banquet. Yet this is a feast guarded by a chemical lock. Cellulose is a complex polymer, a tightly wound molecular chain designed by nature to resist decay. Most animals cannot touch it. Their digestive enzymes simply slide off its surface, leaving the energy locked away, unreachable. For a termite to survive, it had to do more than just eat. It had to master the art of molecular demolition. The secret to this feat is not found in the termite itself, but in a complex, invisible partnership. Termites are not merely insects, they are walking ecosystems. Inside their hindguts, they host a swirling, microscopic universe of symbiotic partners: protozoa, bacteria, and archaea. This is the engine room of the empire. When a worker ingests a piece of wood, it isn't actually breaking it down. Instead, it is delivering raw material to a highly specialized internal bioreactor. Within this dark, anaerobic chamber, these microbes perform a feat of biological alchemy. They secrete cellulase, a specialized enzyme that acts like a molecular pair of scissors, snipping the long, unbreakable chains of cellulose into simple sugars. But the process goes deeper than mere digestion. In many species, specialized archaea perform a secondary, even more critical task: methanogenesis. They take the metabolic byproducts of the bacteria and convert them into methane gas. This isn't just a waste product. It is a vital component of the internal chemistry that maintains the gut's delicate pH balance, ensuring the entire digestive factory remains stable. However, this relationship is not a one-way street of exploitation. It is a sophisticated biological contract. The termite provides a temperature-controlled, nutrient-rich environment, while the microbes provide the chemical keys to the kingdom. But there is a catch, a biological vulnerability that haunts the entire species. Because termites are so dependent on these internal tenants, they are prisoners of their own chemistry. If a termite's gut becomes too dry, or if its internal pH shifts even slightly, the microbial community can collapse. Without its microscopic allies, the termite loses its ability to feed. It could sit atop a mountain of food and still starve to death, unable to unlock the energy within. This dependency is why the workers spend so much of their lives obsessing over the moisture and humidity of the tunnels. They aren't just building homes, they are maintaining the atmospheric conditions required to keep their internal bioreactors alive. They are the custodians of a microscopic life support system. In the termite empire, eating is not a simple act of consumption. It is a high-stakes coordination of chemistry, symbiosis, and environmental control. They do not merely eat the world, they negotiate with it, breaking down the very foundations of the forest to fuel the relentless expansion of their hidden civilization. But in a world of absolute darkness, where the eyes are useless and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth, how does an empire coordinate the movements of millions? How does a single worker know to turn left instead of right, or sense that a breach has occurred on the far side of a sprawling labyrinth? To understand the termite, you must first accept a reality where sight and sound are irrelevant. In the crushing blackness of the subterranean tunnels, the termite has abandoned the visual world entirely. They do not live in a world of light and shadow, but in a world of scent and vibration. They communicate through a sophisticated, invisible language of chemistry, a complex dialect of pheromones. These are not merely smells. They are highly specific molecular signals, tailored with surgical precision. A termite does not simply smell food. It detects a specific hydrocarbon signature that screams, high-quality cellulose found 30 centimeters northeast. This chemical vocabulary is staggeringly diverse. There are alarm pheromones, released in a sudden, frantic burst when a soldier detects a predator, triggering a colony-wide state of mobilization. There are trail pheromones, laid down by workers like a glowing neon breadcrumb trail, guiding thousands of others to a fresh food source. But perhaps most fascinating is the language of social regulation, the pheromones that dictate the very destiny of an individual. Through a process known as primer pheromones, the higher castes actually use chemistry to suppress the biology of others. The queen, through the continuous secretion of specific chemicals, sends a signal that permeates the colony, acting as a biological broadcast that inhibits the development of reproductive organs in other females. It is a chemical dictatorship, maintaining the caste system not through force, but through the subtle manipulation of hormone levels via the air they breathe. Yet, the language of the termite is not limited to scent alone. While they are functionally deaf to the sounds of the surface world, they are master seismologists. They perceive the world through mechanoreceptors, tiny, hair-like structures called sensilla, that detect the faintest tremors in the soil. When a soldier strikes its head against a tunnel wall to signal an intrusion, it isn't making a sound in the traditional sense. It is sending a rhythmic, kinetic pulse through the earth. This is a tactile telegraph. To a termite, a vibration is a word. A sudden, sharp tremor might mean attack, while a slow, rhythmic tapping might signal structural instability. This dual-channel communication system, the chemical and the kinetic, creates a seamless, real-time data network. It allows the colony to function as a superorganism. In this state, the individual termite ceases to be a solitary actor and becomes a single neuron in a massive, subterranean brain. There is no central commander issuing orders. There is no general directing the troops. Instead, there is only the flow of information. When one termite encounters a stimulus, it releases a chemical or a vibration, which triggers a response in its neighbor, which in turn triggers a response in the next. It is a decentralized intelligence, a wave of information that ripples through the dark, allowing the empire to react to a threat or a feast with a speed and coordination that defies its primitive biology. They are a civilization built on whispers and tremors, a silent, invisible intelligence moving in perfect unison beneath the feet of the unsuspecting world. But to understand how this decentralized intelligence emerged, we must look back through the crushing weight of deep time, to a moment when the very blueprint of life was being rewritten. For decades, a grand scientific misconception shrouded the true identity of the termite. To the untrained eye, they appear to be sophisticated ants, solitary, social, and predatory. But the truth is far more radical. Termites are not ants at all. They are, in biological reality, social cockroaches. Nearly 150 million years ago, during the Jurassic period, the ancestors of the modern termite were nothing more than wood-eating isopods, primitive, solitary insects scavenging through the fallen debris of a prehistoric world. They were not masters of coordination, they were lonely wanderers. But then, a biological gamble was taken. Through a process of social evolution, these solitary scavengers began to aggregate. They didn't just live together, they began to function as one. This was the Great Divergence. While the ancestors of ants evolved to be hunters, driven by the pursuit of protein, the termite lineage took a different, more specialized path: the mastery of cellulose. Cellulose is one of the most abundant organic compounds on Earth, yet it is a nutritional fortress. It is incredibly difficult to break down, locked behind complex molecular bonds that most animals simply cannot penetrate. The evolutionary leap that transformed termites from mere scavengers into global architects was the perfection of a symbiotic partnership. They didn't just evolve to eat wood, they evolved to host an internal ecosystem. Within the gut of the termite, a microscopic universe of protozoa and bacteria thrives. This is a biological alliance of staggering complexity. The termite provides the housing and the raw materials, and in exchange, these specialized microbes perform the heavy chemical lifting, fermenting the cellulose into usable energy. This gut microbiome revolution allowed termites to tap into a food source that was virtually untouched by the rest of the animal kingdom, granting them an unparalleled evolutionary advantage. As they mastered the chemistry of digestion, they simultaneously mastered the architecture of survival. The transition from solitary life to the superorganism required a leap in neurological complexity. They had to move from reacting to immediate stimuli to anticipating the needs of a collective. This drove the refinement of the caste system we see today, a biological division of labor so precise it rivals any human industry. They survived the Great Dying, the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, and the shifting of entire continents. While other great empires of the prehistoric world crumbled into the fossil record, the termite empire remained, quietly expanding, quietly consuming, and quietly refining its design. They transitioned from being mere inhabitants of the soil to being the engineers of it. They evolved from simple, wood-gnawing insects into a sophisticated multi-caste civilization capable of terraforming their environment. They became the masters of the microworld, turning the most stubborn waste of the planet into the foundation of a global empire. The leap was complete. They were no longer just survivors. They were the silent, unstoppable architects of the Earth's subterranean frontier. If the evolution of the termite was a slow-motion revolution, then the daily operation of a colony is a high-speed symphony of biological precision. To understand the scale of this empire, we must descend. Beneath the stillness of the forest floor, past the roots and the sleeping worms, lies a world that never truly sleeps. There is no sunrise here, no moonrise, and no sense of passing hours, only the rhythmic, relentless pulse of the collective. The day in a termite colony does not begin with light, but with a shift in chemical tension. As the external temperature fluctuates, a wave of sensory information ripples through the tunnels. This is the Great Awakening. It is not the waking of an individual, but the activation of a superorganism. The first to stir are the workers. These are the unsung engines of the empire, blind and pale, navigating a world composed entirely of touch and scent. They do not move with purpose, they move with instinctual compulsion. As they emerge from their resting chambers, they immediately begin a process of social grooming. This is more than mere hygiene, it is a critical information exchange. By touching one another, they spread pheromones that act as the colony's nervous system, signaling everything from the location of a new food source to the presence of a structural weakness in a tunnel wall. In the deeper, more secure chambers, the atmosphere changes. Here, the air is heavy, humid, and thick with the scent of the monarchy. The queen, a biological marvel of sheer scale, begins her relentless cycle. She is a living factory, an egg-laying machine capable of producing thousands of offspring in a single day. Her existence is entirely decoupled from the outside world. She is the heartbeat of the empire, her every breath regulated by the workers who tend to her with religious devotion. But as the workers forage, a secondary rhythm emerges, the deployment of the soldiers. They do not wake up in the traditional sense, they are stationed. Positioned at the high-traffic junctions and the vulnerable frontiers of the mound, these heavily armored sentinels wait in a state of perpetual readiness. Their heads are massive, disproportionate to their bodies, housing powerful mandibles designed for a single, violent purpose. They are the living barricades, the biological deterrents that turn a soft-bodied colony into a fortified citadel. As the colony reaches its peak activity, a fascinating phenomenon occurs: the triage of labor. Through a process known as phenotypic plasticity, the colony can reallocate its resources in real time. If a breach is detected, the chemical signals sent through the tunnels can trigger a rapid shift in worker behavior, turning foragers into makeshift builders or even inducing certain larvae to undergo rapid metamorphosis into soldiers to meet the threat. This is the brilliance of the termite day. It is a seamless integration of chemistry, biology, and engineering. Every tunnel excavated, every morsel of cellulose consumed, and every egg laid is a calculated move in a game of survival that has been playing out for millions of years. In the darkness of the underground, the empire does not merely exist. It breathes, it reacts, and it expands. A silent, subterranean machine that never misses a beat. If the colony is a living machine, then the mound is its grand, external cathedral, a monument of earth that defies the very laws of structural physics. To the casual observer, a termite mound looks like nothing more than a weathered mound of dried mud, an unremarkable lump of debris left behind by the elements. But look closer, and you realize you are not looking at a pile of dirt, but at a masterpiece of bioengineering. This is the cathedral of dirt. While most creatures build shelters to hide from the world, the termite builds a structure to manipulate it. These mounds, some standing several meters tall, are composed of a sophisticated biological concrete. A mixture of soil, saliva, and fecal matter that, once dried, achieves a compressive strength that rivals man-made masonry. But the true genius lies not in the material, but in the geometry. The anatomy of a massive mound is a masterclass in fractal complexity. It is not a solid mass, but a hollowed-out labyrinth of interconnected galleries, specialized chambers, and soaring chimneys. At its core lies the sanctum, the royal chamber, where the queen resides in a climate-controlled sanctuary, buffered from the volatility of the external world by meters of insulating earth. Surrounding this are the nurseries, the fungal gardens, and the storage vaults, each meticulously positioned to optimize the colony's resource management. But the most profound secret of the cathedral is its respiratory system. A mound of this scale is a breathing organism. To prevent the colony from suffocating under its own metabolic waste, specifically the massive amounts of carbon dioxide generated by millions of insects, the termites have engineered a sophisticated passive ventilation system. Unlike a human building that requires mechanical fans, the mound utilizes the principle of thermal siphoning. The central chimney acts as a solar chimney. As the sun beats down on the mound's exterior, it heats the air within the upper galleries. This warm air rises and escapes through the porous surface, creating a pressure vacuum that draws fresh, oxygen-rich air up from the cooler, subterranean tunnels below. It is a self-regulating, atmospheric engine that maintains a constant internal temperature and humidity, regardless of whether the savanna outside is scorching or freezing. Furthermore, these structures are not static. They are dynamic, living interfaces. Termites utilize a phenomenon known as stigmery, a form of indirect coordination where the physical structure itself serves as the medium for communication. When a worker adds a grain of sand to a wall, that addition changes the chemical and tactile landscape, signaling to the next worker exactly where the structure needs reinforcement. The architecture is the language. In some species, these mounds even incorporate water harvesting capabilities. The intricate microtopography of the mound's surface is designed to capture morning dew and channel it through capillary action into the internal tunnels, ensuring that the empire's hydrological needs are met even in the height of a drought. When we stand before a termite mound, we are not merely looking at a pile of soil. We are looking at a highly specialized, climate-controlled, self-repairing, and self-ventilating fortress. It is a structural triumph that bridges the gap between biology and architecture, a testament to the fact that even the smallest inhabitants of Earth can command the very elements to build a kingdom. But if the mound is the lungs of the empire, how does it manage the delicate fever of life within? To understand this, we must look past the architecture and into the invisible physics of the air itself. In the brutal environments where these empires thrive, from the searing heat of the African savanna to the humid depths of tropical forests, a single degree of temperature fluctuation can mean the difference between a thriving dynasty and a mass extinction. For a termite, temperature is not a matter of comfort, it is a matter of survival. If the colony becomes too hot, the delicate proteins in their bodies denature. If it becomes too dry, their soft, permeable exoskeletons will wither and crack. They live on a knife edge of biological stability. This brings us to the empire's most profound achievement, the mastery of the microclimate. While human architects rely on the heavy, energy-intensive consumption of electricity to fight the elements, the termite employs a strategy of passive elegance. They have mastered the art of thermal inertia. The sheer mass of the mound acts as a thermal buffer, a biological battery that absorbs heat during the day and slowly releases it during the cold of the night. But the true magic lies in a phenomenon known as convective cooling. Within the labyrinthine galleries, the termites have engineered a series of complex, nonlinear pathways that exploit the subtle differences in air density. As the external temperature shifts, the termites do not merely react, they recalibrate. Through a process of structural remodeling, workers can physically alter the diameter of ventilation shafts or the porosity of the mound's walls. If the internal CO2 levels rise too high, or if the temperature spikes, the termites can rapidly construct ventilation chimneys to accelerate the solar chimney effect, or conversely, seal off certain chambers to trap moisture. It is an architectural thermostat that responds in real time to the colony's metabolic needs. Furthermore, there is a hidden dimension to their climate control: the management of latent heat through humidity. A termite mound is a high-precision hygrometer. The termites utilize the evaporative cooling properties of their own waste and the moisture within the soil to regulate the air. By carefully controlling the rate of evaporation within specific humidity chambers, they create a localized weather system. This ensures that the nurseries, where the next generation of the empire is gestating, remain in a state of perpetual, misty equilibrium, even as the world outside parches under a relentless sun. Even more fascinating is the discovery of thermal gradients within the mound. Scientists have observed that different castes and different life stages occupy specific thermal zones. The larvae, which are highly sensitive to environmental shifts, are tucked away in the most stable, deep earth pockets, while the more resilient soldiers may patrol the outer, warmer fringes. The mound is not just a building. It is a stratified thermal map, a multi-layered ecosystem where every inhabitant is placed in the precise atmospheric niche required for their specific biological function. In this way, the termites have solved the most fundamental problem of civilization: how to thrive in a volatile world. They do not fight the climate, they inhabit it. They have turned the chaotic energy of the sun and the shifting winds into a predictable, rhythmic pulse of life, proving that true mastery over the environment does not come from conquering the elements, but from dancing in perfect, calculated harmony with them. Yet, if the mound is the master thermostat, how do these tiny inhabitants move through the veins of this living machine without losing their way or their lives? To understand the scale of their achievement, we must descend from the regulated air of the chambers and enter the dark, pressurized arteries of the labyrinth. The termite empire is not merely a collection of rooms. It is a sprawling, three-dimensional logistics network. While the mound above serves the purpose of climate control, the subterranean labyrinth below is the engine of the colony's economy. This is a world of tunneling efficiency, where every millimeter of excavation is calculated by a collective intelligence that no single insect understands, yet every worker obeys. These tunnels are not haphazardly dug. They are precision-engineered conduits designed to balance two conflicting necessities: the need to reach distant food sources and the absolute requirement to maintain structural integrity. Foraging is a high-stakes gamble. A worker termite venturing out from the safety of the mound is a vulnerable vessel of life, susceptible to desiccation and predation. To mitigate this risk, many species employ a strategy of subterranean foraging, constructing moisture-retaining, foraging tunnels that act as armored highways. These conduits are often reinforced with a mixture of soil, saliva, and fecal matter, a biological concrete that is surprisingly resilient to the shifting pressures of the earth. But the true genius lies in the geometry of the network. Termites do not simply dig straight lines, they utilize a principle of stochastic optimization. By branching their tunnels in fractal-like patterns, they maximize the surface area of their reach while minimizing the energy spent on excavation. This creates a redundant system. If a tunnel collapses due to a heavy rain or a predator's intrusion, the network is so interconnected that the flow of nutrients and information can be rerouted instantly. It is a decentralized internet made of earth and silk. As these tunnels expand, the termites face a terrifying physical reality: the weight of the world. As they delve deeper, the soil pressure increases exponentially. To prevent the entire empire from being crushed, they utilize structural buttressing. They build arched ceilings and thickened support pillars, mimicking the vaulted cathedrals of human architects. They are masters of soil mechanics, understanding how to distribute load and tension through the use of varying grain sizes in their construction materials. They don't just dig holes, they manage the physics of the crust itself. This brings us to the most secretive aspect of their infrastructure: the nutrient arteries. Within the labyrinth, there are specialized corridors dedicated solely to the transport of resources. We are seeing evidence of conveyor belt behaviors, where workers pass food items through a chain of individuals, ensuring that the heavy lifting is distributed and the energy cost to the individual is minimized. This is the pinnacle of social logistics. In this dark, pressurized world, there is no room for error. A single breach in a tunnel can lead to a catastrophic loss of humidity, turning a thriving artery into a death trap. Yet, through a constant, rhythmic process of maintenance tunneling, the workers are perpetually repairing, reinforcing, and expanding. The labyrinth is never finished. It is a living, breathing, growing extension of the colony's will, a masterpiece of subterranean engineering that proves that even in the crushing weight of the dark, complexity can flourish. But what happens when the very element that sustains life becomes a weapon of destruction? In the subterranean world, water is not merely a resource. It is a volatile force of nature that can drown an empire or, through its absence, turn a thriving city into a graveyard of desiccated husks. To survive, the termite colony has mastered a discipline far more complex than simple construction. They have become masters of hydrological engineering. The fundamental challenge is a paradox. Termites require high humidity to prevent their soft, permeable exoskeletons from drying out, yet an uncontrolled influx of groundwater can flood their delicate galleries, suffocating the workers and the royal lineage alike. To navigate this, the colony operates as a living, biological sponge. They do not merely inhabit the soil, they manipulate its very capillary action. By meticulously selecting the grain size of the soil used in their walls, termites create a sophisticated filtration system. They engineer hydrophobic barriers, zones within the mound, and the surrounding tunnels that repel water through the strategic application of specialized lipids and proteins found in their saliva. This allows them to create a moisture gradient, a controlled zone of hydration that stays consistent even when the external environment undergoes violent shifts in precipitation. Deep within the labyrinth, the colony employs a phenomenon known as hygroscopic regulation. Certain specialized chambers are lined with materials that are highly hygroscopic, meaning they actively pull moisture from the air. These act as biological humidifiers, capturing the minute amounts of water vapor released by the collective respiration of millions of insects and redistributing it throughout the tunnels. Conversely, during periods of excess moisture, the architecture shifts. The termites utilize capillary drainage channels, microscopic, angled conduits that use surface tension to pull excess water away from the central nursery chambers and toward sacrificial drainage pits. Perhaps most astounding is their ability to manage the vapor pressure deficit. In the heat of the African savanna or the Australian outback, the air can become a vacuum, sucking the life out of any living thing. To counter this, the termites utilize a form of evaporative cooling that is eerily similar to human sweat, but executed through architecture. They create a system of wicking walls. By controlling the porosity of their earthen structures, they allow a minute, controlled amount of moisture to evaporate through the outer surface of the mound. This phase change from liquid to gas absorbs thermal energy, pulling heat away from the interior and maintaining a stable, cool, and moist microclimate. This is not a static design. It is a dynamic, real-time response to the hydrosphere. When a heavy rain hits, the colony senses the change in soil tension and chemical signaling, triggering a massive, coordinated effort to seal off vulnerable sectors. They are effectively managing the water table of their own miniature world. They have turned the chaotic physics of fluid dynamics into a predictable, managed utility. In the empire of the termite, water is never an enemy to be feared, but a fluid to be harnessed, channeled, and tamed. They do not just survive the elements, they dictate the very terms of their existence, proving that in the struggle for survival, the ability to control the flow of life is the ultimate form of power. But if water is the lifeblood of the empire, what happens when the empire itself is under siege? Having mastered the fluid dynamics of their environment, the colony now faces a much more visceral threat: the invasion of external forces. In the subterranean theater of war, a single breach in a tunnel isn't just a structural failure. It is a catastrophic breach of national security. To prevent this, the termites have moved beyond mere architecture into the realm of military fortification. They do not just build homes, they build bastions. While we often perceive their mounds as organic earthen heaps, a closer look reveals a sophisticated system of active defense. One of the most fascinating, yet least understood, methods of fortification is the construction of sacrificial zones. When termites detect a high probability of an attack, perhaps through the chemical scent of an approaching ant scout, the workers do not simply reinforce the existing walls. They proactively construct buffer galleries. These are secondary, hollowed-out corridors designed to act as shock absorbers. If an enemy breaches the outer perimeter, they find themselves trapped in a labyrinthine killing zone, a narrow, winding passage that strips them of their momentum and exposes them to the soldier caste waiting in the shadows. The materials used in these fortifications are far from random. Termites engage in what can be described as geotechnical optimization. They don't just use any dirt, they create a composite material, a biological concrete. By mixing soil particles with highly specialized salivary secretions containing long-chain polysaccharides, they create a substance that is remarkably resilient to both mechanical pressure and chemical erosion. This termite mortar undergoes a curing process that can make a wall nearly impenetrable to the mandibles of most predatory insects. But the true genius lies in their modular defense strategy. The termite empire is not a single monolithic structure, but a network of interconnected, fortified cells. If a specific sector of the colony is compromised, the termites employ a tactic of rapid compartmentalization. Through a coordinated surge of worker activity, they can seal off a breached chamber within minutes, effectively amputating a limb to save the body. They use plugging materials, a mixture of fecal matter, saliva, and rapidly processed cellulose, to create airtight, watertight, and predator-proof barricades. This is a real-time, biological version of a bulkhead system used in modern naval vessels. Furthermore, the colony utilizes sensory tripwires. Throughout their defensive frontiers, termites construct microscopic, vibration-sensitive filaments. These are essentially biological seismic sensors. When a predator's footsteps create even the slightest tremor in the soil, the vibration is transmitted through these filaments, triggering an immediate chemical alarm. This allows the colony to transition from a state of peaceful construction to a state of total mobilization before the enemy even makes contact. In this hidden world, the line between civil engineering and military strategy is non-existent. Every tunnel is a potential ambush site, every wall is a shield. They have mastered the art of the fortified frontier, creating a landscape where the very ground itself is a weapon. In the empire of the termite, peace is maintained not through diplomacy, but through the relentless, calculated perfection of their defenses. They have turned the soft earth into an unbreakable fortress, proving that even the smallest creatures can build walls that command the respect of the natural world. But what if the secrets of these earthen fortresses hold a key to our own survival? For decades, human architects have struggled with a paradox. As our cities grow larger and more dense, our hunger for energy to cool them grows more insatiable. We build massive, glass and steel monoliths that act like greenhouses, trapping heat and requiring gargantuan, electricity-hungry HVAC systems to remain habitable. We have mastered the art of the machine, yet we have neglected the art of the environment. Enter the field of biomimicry, the practice of looking to nature's time-tested patterns to solve complex human problems. And at the center of this scientific revolution, we find the termite mound. To the untrained eye, a mound is just a pile of dirt. But to a thermal engineer, it is a masterpiece of passive ventilation. While human buildings often rely on forced convection, using fans to push air through ducts, termite mounds utilize stack effect or thermal buoyancy. In many species, particularly the Macroderms genus, the mound acts as a giant, breathing lung. As the sun beats down on the exterior, the temperature differential between the mound's core and its surface creates a natural pressure gradient. This draws cool, fresh air from the subterranean depths up through the central chimneys, while warmer, CO2-rich air is expelled through a complex network of peripheral pores. The most profound realization for modern architects came from observing how these mounds maintain a near-constant internal temperature, even when the external environment swings by 30 degrees Celsius in a single day. This isn't achieved through insulation alone, but through thermal mass and porosity regulation. One of the most famous applications of this principle is the Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe. Designed by architect McPierce, this massive commercial complex lacks a conventional air conditioning system. Instead, it mimics the termites' ability to regulate temperature through a system of chimneys and vents. By using the building's own thermal mass to absorb heat during the day and releasing it at night, combined with a sophisticated airflow system, the building uses 90% less energy than a traditional structure of its size. It is a triumph of efficiency, proving that we can achieve climate control not through brute force, but through intelligent geometry. But the theft of termite design goes deeper than mere ventilation. Engineers are now studying the microporosity of the termites' biological concrete. The way termites manipulate soil moisture and salivary polysaccharides to create structural stability is inspiring new developments in self-healing materials. We are looking at ways to create building materials that can sense cracks and fill them, much like a termite colony repairs a breach in a gallery wall. We are also looking at their stochastic construction methods. Termites do not follow a blueprint, they follow local rules. They respond to individual chemical gradients and tactile sensations, yet the result is a highly organized, macro-scale structure. This is teaching computer scientists and architects how to use swarm intelligence to design buildings that can adapt to changing environmental loads in real time. As we stand on the precipice of a climate crisis, the lesson from the underground empire is clear. The most advanced technology on Earth isn't made of silicon and steel. It is made of dirt, saliva, and 1 billion years of evolutionary refinement. We are finally learning that to build a better future, we must first learn to listen to the silent architects beneath our feet. But if the architecture of the mound is a masterpiece of engineering, then the survival of the lineage depends on a single, desperate moment of biological chaos. Deep within the controlled atmosphere of the colony, a transformation is underway. For months, certain individuals have been sequestered, their bodies diverted from the labor of the worker or the defense of the soldier. These are the alates, the winged royals. They are the living embodiment of the colony's future, heavy with the potential to birth 1,000 new empires. But they are also, in this moment, incredibly vulnerable. The timing of their emergence is not random. It is a masterclass in environmental synchronization. To ensure the highest probability of success, the alates wait for a precise convergence of variables: a specific drop in barometric pressure, a shift in humidity, and the arrival of the first seasonal rains. This is the nuptial flight, a high-stakes ritual where the empire's entire genetic future is cast into the open air. When the signal is given, the mound undergoes a sudden, frantic exodus. Thousands of alates emerge from the subterranean darkness, their translucent wings shimmering in the twilight. They do not fly as a coordinated unit, but as a desperate swarm, rising into the air in a phenomenon known as a swarm. This is the most perilous hour in the life of a termite. The air, once a sanctuary of pheromones and darkness, is now a battlefield. They are targets for everything. To a bird, a swarm is a buffet of high-protein flight. To a dragonfly or a predatory wasp, they are easy prey. Even the wind itself can be a killer, scattering the swarm and separating potential mates before they can find one another. Statistically, the odds are devastating. In a single flight, perhaps only 1 in 1,000 alates will survive the journey. But there is a hidden logic to this carnage. By flying in massive, synchronized numbers, the termites employ a survival strategy known as predator satiation. They overwhelm their enemies with sheer volume. The predators simply cannot eat fast enough to stop the flow, ensuring that even if most perish, a small, elite percentage will slip through the gauntlet. Once the chaos of the flight subsides, the survivors must face a second, even more daunting challenge: the descent. The alates must shed their wings, a useless appendage in the world of the soil, and find a mate. This is not a courtship of dance or song, but a silent, chemical negotiation. They follow the faint, drifting trails of sex pheromones, seeking a partner in the darkening landscape. Once a pair is formed, the true struggle begins. They must find a way back into the earth, away from the eyes of predators, and begin the grueling process of excavation. This is the founding stage, the most lonely and precarious period in the termite life cycle. They are no longer part of a collective. They are a solitary unit against a world that wants them dead. They must dig a chamber, seal themselves away from the outside world, and begin the miracle of the first generation. If they succeed, the royal lineage is secured, and the silent architects will begin to build their empire once again. If they fail, a genetic line that has survived for millions of years simply vanishes into the wind. Imagine, for a moment, the absolute silence of a world where you are the only living thing. No pheromone trails to guide you, no soldier to guard your flank, and no worker to bring you sustenance. For the newly paired termite royals, this isn't a metaphor. It is the terrifying, claustrophobic reality of their new existence. Having shed their wings, the king and queen are now stripped of their only means of escape. They are soft, vulnerable, and biologically burdened. They have transitioned from the high-octane chaos of the nuptial flight to a state of profound, singular isolation. This is the founding stage, a period of existence that is less about conquest and more about pure, desperate endurance. Their first mission is an architectural necessity. They must build a nursery. Using their mandibles, they begin to excavate a small, reinforced chamber within the soil. This is not the sprawling, ventilated cathedral of a mature colony, but a tiny, fragile bunker. Every grain of earth moved is a risk. Every breach in their tunnel could allow a predatory mite or a wandering ant to end their dynasty before it even begins. But the physical labor is only half the battle. The greatest challenge is a biological clock that is ticking with ruthless precision. The queen, now transitioning into her role as the eternal queen, must begin the process of oogenesis, the production of eggs. However, she cannot do this alone. In many species, the founding queen undergoes a physiological metamorphosis, her abdomen swelling to many times its original size, a process that renders her almost entirely immobile. She becomes a biological machine, a living vessel for the future, but she is entirely dependent on the king. In the human world, we often view the male as a secondary figure in a monarchy, but in the termite empire, the king is the indispensable anchor. He is not merely a mate, he is the sole provider and protector. He must forage for the moisture and nutrients required to sustain the queen's skyrocketing metabolic demands. He must defend the tiny, unfortified chamber from the microscopic threats that patrol the soil. He is the lone sentry at the gates of a kingdom that does not yet exist. Perhaps most fascinating is the primordial molt. As the first generation of workers, the eusocial larvae, begins to emerge from the queen's eggs, the royals must undergo a final, critical transformation. They must molt into their reproductive forms, a process that is both physically taxing and incredibly dangerous. During this molt, they are soft-bodied and defenseless. If the first batch of workers does not emerge in time to provide care and structural stability, the royals will succumb to desiccation or infection. This is the ultimate gamble of the termite lineage. They are attempting to jumpstart a complex, multi-layered civilization using only 2 individuals and a handful of eggs. They are fighting against the entropy of the natural world, trying to create order from the chaos of the dirt. Every great empire in history was built on the sweat and blood of pioneers, but none face a more profound loneliness than these 2. They are the architects of a ghost city, working in the dark, praying that the tiny, blind workers they bring into this world will be enough to turn their solitary struggle into a global phenomenon. But once that first generation of workers emerges, the struggle for survival shifts from the external world to the internal mechanics of a single, staggering biological marvel. If the king is the anchor of the colony, the queen is its engine, a living, breathing factory of life that defies the traditional limits of the animal kingdom. As the colony expands, the queen undergoes a transformation so radical it borders on the surreal. She does not merely grow, she reconfigures her entire anatomy to serve a singular, relentless purpose. This is the phenomenon of physogastry. In the heart of the mound, hidden within the dark, humid sanctuary of the royal chamber, the queen's abdomen begins to distend. It swells, stretching her cuticle to its absolute limit, until she resembles a translucent, pulsating sac of life. To witness a mature queen is to witness a creature that has abandoned the luxury of movement for the efficiency of mass production. She is no longer a discrete insect in the way we understand it. She has become a biological organ of the colony itself. The sheer scale of her output is difficult for the human mind to grasp. While a common insect might lay dozens or hundreds of eggs, a highly evolved termite queen can produce thousands of eggs in a single day. Some species are capable of laying up to 30,000 eggs every 24 hours. To maintain this staggering pace, her internal physiology must operate at a metabolic intensity that would be fatal to almost any other organism. Her digestive system, her circulatory system, and her reproductive organs are all redirected, funneling every available calorie from the nutrients provided by her workers into the continuous production of ova. This is not just high-speed reproduction, it is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. To prevent her own body from collapsing under the weight of this expansion, the queen utilizes a sophisticated system of nutrient recycling. She is a closed-loop system. The proteins and lipids required for egg production are often scavenged from the very workers that tend to her, creating a direct metabolic pipeline from the labor force to the monarchy. Yet there is a darker, more specialized side to this biological miracle. In certain species, the queen possesses the ability to manipulate the very genetics of her offspring. Through a process involving pheromonal signaling and nutritional control, she can influence the developmental pathways of her larvae. By secreting specific chemical cues, she dictates whether an egg will develop into a mindless, tireless worker, a heavily armored soldier, or a future reproductive. She is not just the mother of the empire. She is its programmer, coding the social hierarchy through the chemistry of her own body. This eternal queen can remain fertile for decades, sometimes even a lifetime, providing an unbroken thread of continuity that spans generations. While the workers live short, frantic lives of labor and the soldiers die in the heat of combat, the queen remains the constant. She is the biological memory of the colony, the singular point of origin that ensures that even as individual termites perish, the empire itself remains immortal. She is the heartbeat in the dark, a rhythmic, unstoppable force of life that turns the silent soil into a sprawling, breathing civilization. But if the queen is the engine of this empire, a pulsating factory of infinite potential, then what of the king? In the human imagination, a monarch is often a figure of conquest, a wanderer, or a strategist. But in the subterranean darkness of the termite mound, the king's role is far more profound and far more restrictive. He is not a ruler in the sense of command. He is a prisoner of his own biology. Once the nuptial flight ends and the royal pair digs their first sanctuary, the male undergoes a metamorphosis that is as tragic as it is essential. The wings that once carried him through the sky are shed, discarded like relics of a former life. His legs, designed for the frantic search for a mate, begin to atrophy. He will never walk the long distances of the foraging trails, nor will he ever participate in the construction of the cathedral-like mounds. He is sequestered. He is anchored. The king's burden is a life of absolute, singular devotion. While the queen expands into a gargantuan vessel of egg production, the king remains a relatively small, constant presence by her side. But do not mistake his size for insignificance. He is the biological stabilizer of the dynasty. His primary function is the continuous, lifelong fertilization of the queen. In many species, this is not a periodic event, but a relentless, rhythmic necessity. He must remain in constant physical contact with the queen, a task that requires a metabolic stamina that belies his modest stature. This proximity creates a fascinating and often overlooked biological phenomenon. The king is the guardian of the colony's genetic integrity. Because the queen is an egg-laying machine of such staggering scale, the risk of genetic drift or the introduction of deleterious mutations is a constant evolutionary threat. The king acts as the constant variable. Through his continuous presence, he ensures that the lineage remains stable, providing the genetic pulse that keeps the queen's massive output from descending into biological chaos. Furthermore, the king serves as a vital chemical anchor. While the queen uses pheromones to program the caste system, the king's own chemical signature helps define the royal status of the chamber. His presence helps suppress the development of secondary reproductives within the colony, preventing a political schism that could lead to the birth of rival royal lineages. He is, in many ways, the stabilizer of the social order, a living chemical seal that keeps the monarchy unified. Yet there is a profound loneliness to his existence. He is a king who can never leave his throne, a traveler who has traded the horizon for a dark, humid cell. He lives in a state of permanent, specialized stasis. He does not eat the wood the workers bring. He does not defend the walls the soldiers guard. He exists solely to serve the queen's reproductive fire. If the queen is the heartbeat of the empire, the king is its steady, unwavering rhythm. He is the silent partner in the greatest biological partnership on Earth. His life is a testament to a brutal evolutionary truth. In the empire of the termite, individual freedom is the price paid for collective immortality. He is the architect of nothing, the warrior of none, but without his singular, burdened devotion, the eternal engine of the queen would simply stall. But what happens when that engine finally fails? In the grand, sweeping history of a termite colony, time is both a builder and a destroyer. The queen, despite her near-mythic reproductive capacity, is not immortal. Whether through the slow attrition of age, the metabolic exhaustion of laying millions of eggs, or a catastrophic breach in the mound's defenses, the monarchy is destined to fall. And in the world of the termite, the death of a monarch is not merely a tragedy, it is an existential crisis. When the queen's egg production falters, the chemical atmosphere of the colony shifts instantly. The pheromonal command that maintains the social order begins to fade, like a dying echo in a vast canyon. Without the queen's chemical signature to suppress the development of other castes, the very structure of the empire begins to destabilize. This is the moment of biological anarchy. In most termite species, the death of the royal pair triggers a desperate, frantic scramble for survival. The workers, sensing the loss of their reproductive core, enter a state of heightened agitation. They do not mourn, they react. The colony must choose between two paths: total collapse or a radical, high-stakes reorganization. In some species, the colony attempts to reboot the monarchy through a process of emergency succession. If the queen dies, certain larvae or nymphs, individuals that were previously kept in a state of developmental arrest by the queen's pheromones, may undergo a rapid metamorphosis. These neotenics, or secondary reproductives, can rise from the worker ranks to take up the mantle of royalty. They are the biological backups, the emergency contingency plans of the empire. However, this is a perilous gamble. These secondary royals often lack the specialized physiological adaptations of the primary lineage, and their rise can lead to a split in the colony, where rival factions emerge, fighting for control of the dwindling resources. But for many colonies, the fall of the monarchy is an absolute death sentence. Without a queen to replenish the worker and soldier populations, the colony becomes a ghost ship. The existing workers will continue to forage, to build, and to defend, driven by an ancestral instinct that outlives their purpose. They are performing tasks for a master that no longer exists. They are maintaining a cathedral for a god that has died. As the older generation of workers reaches the end of its lifespan, there is no new generation to replace them. The foraging trails grow cold. The tunnels begin to crumble. The sophisticated ventilation systems fail as the moisture levels fluctuate wildly. The empire, once a buzzing, breathing machine of collective intelligence, slowly descends into a silent, hollow shell. Yet, even in this collapse, there is a shadow of continuity. The death of one empire often provides the very catalyst for the birth of another. The sudden lack of pheromonal suppression can trigger a massive, synchronized emergence of alates, the winged reproductives, from neighboring colonies or even from the remnants of the dying one. These winged wanderers take to the sky in a desperate, final nuptial flight, carrying the genetic memory of the fallen kingdom into the wind. The fall of a monarchy is not the end of the termite story. It is a violent, necessary transition. It is the moment where the individual lineage ends so that the species may continue its uninterrupted march through the soil. The empire falls, but the cycle is eternal. How does a creature with a brain no larger than a grain of salt possess the wisdom to build a skyscraper? To understand the termite, we must move past the idea of the individual. If you were to isolate a single worker, you would find a creature of limited agency, a biological automaton driven by a narrow, frantic set of impulses. Yet, when thousands of these mindless units converge, something miraculous happens. They transcend their own limitations, forming a superorganism, a singular, sentient entity that breathes, eats, and thinks through the collective. This is not the result of a central commander or a tactical general. There is no brain in the center of the mound. Instead, the intelligence of the empire is decentralized, written into the very fabric of their DNA. It is a genetic blueprint that replaces individual thought with a sophisticated system of algorithmic instincts. Every action taken within the labyrinth is a response to a local stimulus, a phenomenon scientists call stigmergy. A termite does not decide to build a wall. Rather, a termite encounters a pile of chewed wood fibers, and its genetic programming dictates that it must pick up a piece and deposit it elsewhere. When that piece is deposited, it changes the physical environment, creating a new stimulus that triggers the next termite to act. It is a self-organizing feedback loop, a biological computer where the software is encoded in their genes and the hardware is the very soil they manipulate. This instinctual programming is incredibly precise. It dictates the exact chemical threshold required to trigger a soldier's aggression or a worker's foraging drive. It even manages the complex division of labor through phenotypic plasticity. This is one of the most profound mysteries of their biology: the ability of a single genome to produce vastly different physical forms, the massive, armored soldier and the tiny, fragile worker, based solely on the environmental cues and pheromonal concentrations they encounter during development. The DNA doesn't just provide a map. It provides a set of instructions that can be edited in real time by the colony's needs. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this blueprint is its capacity for self-sacrifice. The genetic code of the termite does not prioritize the survival of the self, but the survival of the information. This is why workers will labor until their exoskeletons are worn thin, and why soldiers will engage in suicidal defensive maneuvers against an invading ant army. To the individual, death is inevitable. To the genome, death is irrelevant as long as the colony's chemical and structural integrity remains intact. They are, in essence, living cells in a much larger body. Just as your white blood cells do not know they are protecting you, but simply react to the presence of a pathogen, the termite reacts to the presence of a breach, a food source, or a royal vacancy. They are slaves to a chemical script written over millions of years of evolution. In this hidden empire, the mind is not found in the head of the insect, but in the space between them. It is a ghost in the machine, a collective consciousness that emerges from the shadows of the soil, guided by a blueprint so perfect, it requires no thought at all. But what happens when this perfect, self-organizing machine encounters an external force that does not follow its rules? What happens when the body is attacked by a predator that seeks not to consume the individual, but to dismantle the entire organism? For the termite empire, the ultimate nightmare is not a drought or a famine, but the arrival of the ants. If the termite colony is a finely tuned machine, an invading ant army is a corrosive acid designed to find every structural weakness and exploit it. This is not a skirmish. It is a total war of attrition. Unlike the termites' decentralized intelligence, which builds through cooperation, the ants' intelligence is predatory and relentless. They do not seek to build, they seek to breach. The siege begins not with a roar, but with a chemical alarm. The moment an ant pierces the outer sanctum of the mound, the stigmergy, we discussed earlier, shifts from a mode of construction to a mode of combat. The pheromonal signature of the colony changes instantly. The air becomes thick with alarm pheromones, volatile chemical signals that act as a biological siren, triggering an immediate, frantic mobilization of the soldier caste. As the ants pour into the breach, the termite soldiers undergo a transformation. While workers are the lifeblood of the colony, the soldiers are its specialized, living weaponry. In many species, these soldiers possess highly modified, sclerotized heads, essentially organic helmets designed to withstand the crushing mandibles of an ant. But the defense is more sophisticated than mere physical strength. Some termite species engage in a form of biological, scorched earth tactics. When a breach is detected, soldiers may rush toward the opening and undergo autothyses, a suicidal mechanism where they rupture their own bodies, spraying a toxic, sticky glue or a potent chemical irritant onto the invaders. It is a horrific, microscopic execution. The soldier dies, but in doing so, it creates a chemical barrier that entangles and poisons the advancing enemy, effectively sealing the wound with its own corpse. This is the brutal reality of the superorganism. To protect the information, the royal lineage, and the collective genome, the individual must be treated as entirely expendable. The battleground is a claustrophobic nightmare of narrow tunnels and pitch-black chambers. Ants use their superior speed and sensory perception to navigate the labyrinth, while termites rely on their specialized morphology to hold the line. It is a war of geometry. The ants try to expand their presence, while the termites attempt to constrict, to block, and to wall off the infection. The stakes of this siege cannot be overstated. A single successful breach can lead to a colony collapse cascade. If the ants reach the royal chamber, the genetic continuity of the empire is severed. The queen, the biological engine of the entire civilization, is lost, and with her, the ability to replace the dying workers and soldiers. In the dark, silent depths of the earth, the siege of the mound is a testament to the terrifying efficiency of evolution. It is a struggle where the line between biology and warfare disappears, and where the survival of a kingdom depends on the ability of a mindless swarm to react, with terrifying precision, to the presence of death. But if the siege is the storm, then the soldier caste is the lightning, a specialized, lethal response designed to strike with surgical, chemical precision. While the physical strength of a soldier's mandible is formidable, the true terror of the termite arsenal lies in the invisible. In the high-stakes theater of subterranean combat, many termite species do not rely on biting alone. They utilize a sophisticated array of biochemical weapons that turn the very air of the tunnels into a toxic battlefield. To understand this, we must look beyond the jaw. In many advanced lineages, particularly within the subfamily Nasutermitini, the soldier has undergone one of the most radical evolutionary transformations in the insect world. These are the Nasut termites. Their heads are not equipped with traditional mandibles for crushing, but are instead elongated into a specialized, nozzle-like structure called a nasus. This is not a mouth, it is a biological mortar. When an invader breaches the perimeter, the Nasut soldier does not bite. Instead, it aims its snout and discharges a high-pressure stream of chemically complex secretions. This is not merely a liquid, it is a multi-purpose tactical payload. The substance is often a cocktail of terpenes and resins that serve a dual purpose. It is both a physical adhesive and a neurological disruptor. As the spray hits the advancing ant, it acts like a fast-setting liquid glue, entangling the predator's legs and mandibles, rendering it immobile within seconds. But the horror does not end with immobilization. Simultaneously, these secretions often contain volatile irritants that attack the ant's sensory organs. By flooding the enemy's chemical receptors, the termite spray creates a sensory blackout, leaving the invader blind and disoriented in the pitch-black tunnels. It is a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The termite uses a single, concentrated burst to neutralize an enemy that is faster, stronger, and more agile. Even more specialized are the species that employ contact toxins. In these colonies, the soldiers produce defensive fluids that are absorbed directly through the enemy's exoskeleton. These chemicals can interfere with the ant's nervous system, causing immediate paralysis or death. It is a form of molecular sabotage, where the very touch of a termite soldier becomes a death sentence. Yet, perhaps the most chilling advancement in termite weaponry is the use of area-denial chemicals. Some species can secrete substances that linger in the tunnels long after the battle has moved elsewhere. These chemical landmines serve to mark the territory of the dead, creating a sensory barrier that warns other invaders of the lethality of the zone. This is not just instinct, it is highly evolved chemistry. The termites have effectively weaponized their own metabolic byproducts, turning the waste of their digestion into the ammunition of their defense. In this microscopic arms race, the termite soldier is more than just a guard. It is a living chemical laboratory, capable of synthesizing the exact molecular solution required to halt an invasion. In the silent, dark corridors of the empire, the deadliest weapon is often the one you cannot see, smell, or escape until it is far too late. But if the termite is a master of chemical warfare, one must wonder. In a world built on the foundations of consumption, who is consuming the consumer? To look upon a termite mound is to see a monument of stability, but to the predators of the undergrowth, it is a siren song. A massive, nutrient-dense buffet calling out to the hungriest hunters in the biosphere. The empire does not just face organized armies, it faces a relentless, multi-tiered hierarchy of predation that spans from the microscopic to the vertebrate. The most persistent threat is the one that plays by different rules. While the ants represent a conventional military force, the fungi and specialized microbes represent a biological siege. Some species of entomopathogenic fungi act as silent assassins. They do not breach the walls. They wait for a single, microscopic spore to find a hairline fracture in a tunnel or a lapse in a worker's grooming. Once inside, the fungus doesn't just kill, it colonizes. It grows through the termite's soft cuticle, hijacking its internal nutrients and eventually erupting from the insect's body in a grotesque display of spore dispersal. For the colony, this is a ghost war, an enemy that cannot be fought with mandibles or chemical sprays because the enemy is part of the very air they breathe. Then there are the specialists, the true connoisseurs of the termite. Consider the aardvark, a creature that has evolved specifically to crack the code of the termite empire. While a soldier's chemical spray might paralyze a single ant, it is useless against a predator that can consume thousands of termites in a single, rhythmic stroke of a powerful, mucus-coated tongue. The aardvark's saliva is a marvel of evolutionary engineering, neutralizing the termite's defensive chemicals upon contact, turning a lethal spray into nothing more than a momentary nuisance. In the shadows of the African savanna, the anteater performs a similar feat of biological bypass. These predators have evolved to ignore the armor of the mound entirely. They do not engage in the tactical combat of the tunnels. They simply bypass the defenses through sheer scale and specialized anatomy, treating the fortified empire as nothing more than a high-calorie meal. Even the very ground beneath the mound is not safe. Certain species of lizards and amphibians have developed highly specialized hunting techniques, sensing the subtle vibrations of termite activity through the soil. They strike with lightning speed, pulling workers from their subterranean galleries before the chemical alarms can even be triggered. Yet, perhaps the most sophisticated predator is the one that mimics the empire itself. There are certain species of social parasites, insects that have evolved to bypass the termite's pheromone-based security systems. These invaders don't attack the mound, they infiltrate it. By synthesizing the exact chemical signature of the colony's own language, these parasites slip past the soldiers undetected. They enter the heart of the empire not as conquerors, but as imposters, slowly siphoning off resources or even replacing the royal lineage from within. In the grand ecology of the Earth, the termite empire is a paradox. It is a fortress of incredible engineering and chemical sophistication, yet it remains a vital, pulsing hub of energy in the food web. To the termite, every breach is a catastrophe. To the predator, every breach is an opportunity. The empire is not just a kingdom of builders. It is a massive, walking reservoir of life, perpetually being harvested by a world that refuses to let its secrets go uneaten. But what happens when the enemy is not a predator seeking a meal, but a rival empire seeking the same soil? If the ants are the marauders and the fungi are the assassins, then the rival termite colony is the true geopolitical competitor. In the subterranean world, space is the ultimate currency. A prime piece of decaying hardwood or a nutrient-rich patch of silt is not just a resource, it is a sovereign territory. When two colonies expand their tunnel networks toward one another, they are not merely growing, they are engaging in a slow-motion collision of two different civilizations. This is not a war of chance encounters, but a war of calculated expansion. As the foraging frontiers of two colonies approach, the air in the soil becomes thick with a terrifying realization. The pheromone signatures are changing. The chemical scent of the territory is shifting from the familiar smell of kin to the alien, aggressive musk of a stranger. Unlike the chaotic raids of ants, these border wars are often characterized by a phenomenon known as territorial stalemate. As the two empires push their tunnel networks toward a central frontier, they encounter a literal wall of chemical resistance. Neither side can afford a full-scale invasion, which would risk the stability of the royal chamber, so they engage in a high-stakes game of subterranean chess. They build fortified barricades of hardened mud and saliva, creating no-man's lands where neither side dares to tread. Yet, when the stalemate breaks, the violence is absolute. In species like the macroderms, these conflicts can escalate into massive, coordinated offensive maneuvers. The soldiers do not merely defend, they launch surgical strikes. They use their hypertrophied mandibles to decapitate the opposition, creating a literal graveyard of chitinous remains that serves as a grim boundary marker for the next generation. There is a specialized, almost chilling biological phenomenon that occurs during these disputes: chemical masking. To gain an advantage, a highly evolved colony may attempt to overwrite the territory of a neighbor. By saturating a contested zone with a concentrated, overwhelming flood of their own colony's pheromones, they effectively erase the presence of the rival, attempting to trick the opposing workers into believing they have wandered into their own home, only to lead them into a lethal ambush. Furthermore, these wars are not fought solely on the front lines. In some highly competitive ecosystems, colonies engage in resource sabotage. A dominant colony may detect the presence of a smaller, weaker neighbor and deliberately redirect their tunneling efforts to intercept the rival's primary food source. By cutting off the flow of nutrients, the larger empire can effectively starve a rival colony into extinction without ever engaging in a single physical skirmish. It is a siege by attrition, waged in the absolute darkness of the earth. In these border wars, we see the true nature of the termite empire. It is not a peaceful collective, but a fiercely expansionist state. Every new tunnel dug, every new mound raised, is a claim staked in a global underground land grab. The soil is not just a home, it is a battlefield, and the map of the world is being redrawn every single day, one grain of sand at a time, through the relentless, silent struggle for dominance. In the theater of war, we often focus on the glory of the soldier. But in the termite empire, the most profound act of heroism is found in the silence of the worker. If the soldier is the shield, the worker is the very lifeblood of the colony, and in times of crisis, that lifeblood is spilled with calculated, terrifying precision. To understand the worker's sacrifice, one must first understand their fragility. Unlike the heavily armored soldiers, workers are soft-bodied, pale, and functionally defenseless. They are the engineers, the nurses, and the providers. They possess no weapons, no thick chitinous plates, and no specialized mandibles for combat. In a direct confrontation, a worker is not a combatant. It is merely a casualty. Yet, the survival of the empire demands that these individuals be treated as a renewable, and often expendable, resource. When a breach occurs, perhaps a predator has cracked the mound's outer shell or a rival colony has pierced a foraging tunnel, the response is not merely defensive, it is sacrificial. We see this most intensely in a phenomenon known as altruistic suicide. In certain species, when a worker is fatally wounded or finds itself trapped in a breach, it does not merely die. It utilizes its own death to fortify the colony. As a worker is crushed or overwhelmed, it may undergo a rapid physiological shift. In some highly specialized lineages, dying workers will release a final, concentrated burst of alarm pheromones. This chemical scream does not just signal danger. It serves as a biological beacon, summoning soldiers to the exact coordinates of the breach. The worker's death becomes a localized GPS coordinate for the empire's defense. But the sacrifice goes deeper than mere signaling. There is a grim biological phenomenon known as body plugging. When a tunnel is compromised, workers will sometimes crowd into the breach, pressing their soft bodies against the opening. They are not attempting to fight, they are attempting to become the wall. They use their own physical mass to create a living dam, a fleshy barricade intended to slow the ingress of enemies long enough for the soldiers to arrive or for the colony to seal the gap with mud and excrement. They die by being crushed, smothered, or eaten, all to buy the empire a few precious seconds of structural integrity. Even more profound is the concept of trophallaxis-driven survival. The colony operates on a complex system of liquid food sharing, where nutrients are passed from mouth to mouth in a continuous social web. When a section of the colony is cut off or a worker is dying, it will often prioritize the transfer of its last chemical and nutritional reserves to its nestmates before it expires. This ensures that even as the individual perishes, its metabolic energy is recycled back into the collective. In the termite world, death is not an end, but a transfer of assets. This is the paradox of the termite empire. Its incredible strength is built upon the intentional loss of its individuals. There is no concept of the self in the dark, damp corridors of the mound. There is only the mission. The worker understands, through an instinct honed over millions of years, that a single life is a negligible price to pay for the continuity of the lineage. They do not die in vain, they die as the very mortar that holds the empire together. But what happens when the sacrifice fails? What happens when the breach is not a minor puncture, but a catastrophic failure of the empire's structural and environmental sanctity? To the casual observer, a termite mound is a fortress of hardened earth, a monolith of stability. But to the colony, it is a pressurized vessel, a delicate equilibrium of humidity, carbon dioxide levels, and temperature. The empire does not just live within these walls, it lives because of them. When the integrity of the mound is compromised, whether by the crushing weight of a predator, the invasive tunneling of a rival, or the sheer force of a seasonal flood, the battleground shifts from the physical to the atmospheric. A breach is more than a hole, it is a leak in the colony's life support system. The moment a breach occurs, the microclimate begins to hemorrhage. Termites are hypersensitive to desiccation. Their soft, permeable cuticles, which allow for efficient gas exchange, also make them incredibly vulnerable to moisture loss. In a sudden breach, the carefully regulated humidity of the inner sanctum can plummet in minutes. This triggers a systemic panic. The invisible battleground is, in many ways, a struggle against the very air itself. If the moisture levels drop below a critical threshold, the workers begin to desiccate, their biological processes grinding to a halt. An empire that can survive 1,000 soldiers can be defeated by a single gust of dry wind through a cracked tunnel. This environmental instability creates a secondary, more insidious threat, the breakdown of chemical communication. The termite empire is governed by the scent of order. Every corridor, every food source, and every soldier is identified by a specific chemical signature. A breach introduces noise, foreign scents from the outside world, and more dangerously, the rapid dispersal of the colony's own pheromones. When the alarm pheromones are swept away by a draft, or when the scent of a predator floods the tunnels, the collective intelligence of the swarm becomes fragmented. The superorganism loses its ability to think as one. The soldiers may charge blindly into empty space, while the workers, unable to find the scent of their nestmates, wander into the void to die. In the most extreme cases, a breach leads to a phenomenon known as colony collapse via social disintegration. As the environmental controls fail, the biological hierarchy begins to fracture. The queen, the singular heartbeat of the empire, is the most vulnerable. If a breach allows a predator to reach the royal chamber, or if the atmospheric shift becomes too great for her to maintain her massive metabolic output, the empire enters a death spiral. Without the queen's continuous production of pheromonal regulators, the caste system loses its cohesion. The soldiers lose their drive to defend, the workers lose their drive to build. The collapse is not always a sudden explosion of violence. Often, it is a quiet, systemic evaporation. It is the sound of 1,000 tiny lives failing as the humidity fades and the chemical maps dissolve. One crack in the wall, one momentary lapse in the architecture, and the empire, an entity that has survived for hundreds of millions of years, can vanish into the soil, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell of dried mud. In the world of the termite, the smallest vulnerability is the gateway to total extinction. Yet, even as empires rise and fall in these silent wars, a much larger, more profound transformation is occurring, one that transcends the survival of a single colony and touches the very heartbeat of the planet. Because while we see them as destroyers to the earth, they are the ultimate alchemists. Consider the fallen giant, a massive, ancient hardwood tree toppled by a storm or succumbed to old age. To the rest of the forest, this is a corpse, a static, decaying monument of carbon. But to the termite, it is a treasury. It is an untapped reservoir of energy, locked away within the complex, stubborn chains of cellulose and lignin. This is where the true magic of the empire begins. Most animals look at a piece of dead wood and see nothing but a barrier. But the termite sees a feast. However, there is a biological problem. Cellulose is one of the most difficult substances on Earth to break down. It is a molecular fortress. To crack it, the termite has evolved a partnership that is nothing short of miraculous. Within the dark, humid gut of the termite lives a microscopic civilization of its own, a complex consortium of protozoa, bacteria, and archaea. This is the internal empire. When a worker consumes a fragment of wood, it isn't just eating, it is delivering raw material to a biological refinery. These specialized microbes perform a feat of chemical engineering that humans still struggle to replicate at scale. Through a process of anaerobic fermentation, they dismantle the crystalline structure of cellulose, converting it into short-chain fatty acids that the termite can finally absorb as fuel. But the termite does not just take, it gives back. This is the cycle of the great recyclers. As they graze upon the dead, they are essentially digesting the landscape. They break down the complex organic matter that would otherwise clog the Earth's surfaces, turning rigid, lifeless timber into nutrient-rich frass, a specialized form of excrement that acts as a high-octane fertilizer for the soil. They are the bridge between death and rebirth. By accelerating the decomposition process, termites release essential nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium back into the earth, fueling the growth of the very trees that will one day fall to feed the next generation. They are the invisible hands that turn the graveyard of the forest into its garden. In fact, the scale of this impact is staggering. In certain tropical ecosystems, termites are responsible for the turnover of nearly a third of all fallen organic matter. They are the primary drivers of the terrestrial carbon cycle, moving carbon from the solid state of wood back into the soil and the atmosphere. Without this constant, grinding labor, the Earth's nutrient cycles would stutter and stall. The forests would choke on their own debris, and the soil would become a barren wasteland, stripped of the life-giving minerals required for new growth. To view the termite merely as a pest is to misunderstand the very mechanics of life on Earth. They are not just inhabitants of the soil, they are the architects of its fertility. They take the end of one story, the death of a tree, and use it to write the first chapter of 1,000 new ones. They are the silent, tireless engineers of renewal, ensuring that in the grand theater of nature, nothing is ever truly wasted. But if they are the alchemists of the soil, we must ask, What is the true weight of their work? To understand the termite is to understand the very breath of the planet. We often think of the carbon cycle as a massive atmospheric phenomenon, the slow dance of carbon dioxide moving between the sky and the trees. But there is a hidden, subterranean engine driving this process, and it is powered by the relentless hunger of the termite. While plants act as the world's great carbon sinks, locking carbon away in their trunks and leaves, they are not the only players in this cosmic ledger. The termites are the great redistributors. By consuming the lignified tissues of dead vegetation, termites perform a critical metabolic redirection. They take carbon that has been sequestered, effectively frozen in time within the structural bones of a tree, and they unlock it. Through their digestive process, they convert that solid, stable carbon back into more mobile forms. Some of this carbon is released back into the atmosphere as CO2 through their respiration, contributing to the global gaseous exchange. But a significant portion undergoes a much more complex journey. Through the creation of their massive, interconnected tunnel networks, termites act as biological pumps. They transport organic carbon deep into the subsoil, far beyond the reach of surface-level decomposers like fungi or bacteria. This process, known as bioturbation, doesn't just move nutrients, it fundamentally alters the soil's architecture. As they move earth to build their fortresses, they create micropockets of high-density organic matter deep underground. This creates a long-term carbon storage mechanism, burying carbon in the earth where it can remain for centuries, stabilizing the soil structure and preventing it from eroding into the sea. Furthermore, the termites facilitate a nutrient priming effect. As they break down complex polymers, they release a concentrated burst of nitrogen and minerals that stimulates the microbial activity of the surrounding soil. This creates a localized, hotspot of fertility. In the savannas of Africa or the rainforests of the Amazon, these termite mounds act as islands of abundance. The soil within and around a mound is often significantly richer in organic carbon and essential elements than the surrounding landscape, creating a mosaic of high-productivity zones that support entire webs of life, from the smallest nematode to the largest herbivore. Even more fascinating is their role in the nitrogen cycle, a close cousin to the carbon flow. Termites are among the few organisms capable of processing organic nitrogen from woody debris, making it bioavailable to plants that would otherwise starve in a nitrogen-poor environment. When we zoom out, past the individual worker, past the mound, and past the forest, we see a global feedback loop. The termites are the regulators. They ensure that the carbon does not simply pile up in a stagnant graveyard of wood, but instead flows in a continuous, rhythmic pulse through the biosphere. They are the metabolic heartbeat of the terrestrial world, a microscopic workforce managing a planetary budget, ensuring that the currency of life, carbon, is always in circulation, always moving, and always ready to fuel the next great surge of biological evolution. But what happens when this metabolic heartbeat, this relentless engine of redistribution, decides to pulse within the walls of our own sanctuary? For all their ecological brilliance, the termites possess a singular, terrifying flaw in their programming. They cannot distinguish between the fallen timber of a forest and the structural timber of a human civilization. To a termite, a cedar beam is not a piece of architecture. It is a concentrated, high-density cache of sequestered carbon waiting to be unlocked. The transition from beneficial recycler to domestic invader is often a silent, invisible invasion. While we sleep, the empire is conducting a reconnaissance mission. They do not strike with the sudden violence of a predator. Instead, they utilize a strategy of stealth and structural subversion. They exploit the micro-corridors of our existence, the hairline cracks in a concrete foundation, the gaps around plumbing, or the moisture-laden seams of a window frame. Once a foothold is established, the empire begins its most insidious work. the construction of mud tubes. These are not merely tunnels, they are armored highways. These tubes, composed of a mixture of soil, saliva, and fecal matter, act as pressurized, climate-controlled conduits that allow the workers to bypass the lethal, desiccating air of the outside world. They create a private, humid microenvironment that protects the delicate, soft-bodied workers from being dried out, effectively bringing the forest floor into the very heart of our living rooms. This is where the biology of the termite becomes a nightmare for human engineering. We build our homes to withstand gravity, wind, and rain, but we rarely build them to withstand a decentralized, multi-generational siege. Because termites are socially intelligent, they do not consume a house linearly. They do not eat from the outside in. Instead, they target the internal skeleton. They can hollow out a massive structural support beam, leaving the exterior veneer perfectly intact, creating a deceptive shell that hides a hollowed-out void. By the time a homeowner notices a slight sag in a floorboard or a patch of bubbling paint, the structural integrity of the building has already been fundamentally compromised. Perhaps most unsettling is the sheer scale of their biological efficiency. A single colony can contain millions of individuals, all operating under a collective intelligence that prioritizes the expansion of the food source above all else. They are masters of resource exploitation. In a process known as foraging plasticity, they can sense the chemical signatures of cellulose through solid barriers, allowing them to locate a target with mathematical precision. In this context, our homes become nothing more than artificial groves, unnatural, high-concentration islands of carbon in a landscape that they view as a buffet. We have spent millennia building monuments to our permanence, using the very materials they are evolved to dismantle. As we move from the grand scale of the global carbon cycle to the intimate scale of the domestic sphere, we realize a chilling truth. The empire does not see our walls as boundaries, but as invitations. The shadow side of their greatness is that, in their quest to fuel the cycle of life, they may well consume the very foundations upon which our own lives are built. And it is within this collision of two incompatible worlds, the biological drive to consume and the human drive to build, that we find one of the most staggering, yet often unquantified, economic burdens on modern civilization. When we speak of the cost, we are not merely discussing the price of a repair bill or a new piece of furniture. We are describing a global, silent drain on human capital. In the United States alone, the annual damage caused by termites is estimated to exceed $10 billion. Globally, this figure climbs into a stratosphere of loss that rivals the impact of major natural disasters. Yet it lacks the cinematic drama of a hurricane or an earthquake because it arrives not with a roar, but with a whisper. This is an economy of attrition. Unlike a fire that destroys a structure in minutes, the termite empire operates on a timeline of slow, compounding interest. They are the ultimate, long-term liabilities. Because of their ability to exploit the internal skeleton of a building, the financial damage often remains hidden in the balance sheets of property values long before it is discovered by the human eye. A house may appear pristine, its curb appeal intact, while its true valuation is being systematically liquidated from the inside out. This creates a hidden depreciation, a phenomenon where the structural equity of a home is being eaten away by a decentralized workforce that pays no taxes and recognizes no property lines. Furthermore, the economic impact extends into a complex secondary market, the multi-billion-dollar industry of chemical warfare and structural fortification. We have entered into a desperate arms race, spending vast sums on termiticides, liquid barriers, and advanced sensor technologies. We are essentially paying a biological tax to defend our borders. We employ specialized engineers to design, termite-proof, foundations and utilize expensive, pressurized chemical injections to create subterranean dead zones. This is a massive redirection of human resources. Wealth that could be used for innovation or expansion is instead diverted into the perpetual maintenance of a defensive perimeter. But there is a deeper, more scientific complexity to this cost, the remediation multiplier. When a termite infestation is discovered, the cost is rarely just the replacement of the wood. Because termites are often accompanied by moisture issues, the very thing that attracts them, the economic fallout triggers a domino effect. You must repair the wood, then fix the plumbing, then remediate the mold, then stabilize the foundation. The biological necessity of the termite, their need for high humidity, forces us into a cycle of expensive, systemic reconstruction. In certain developing economies, the impact is even more devastating. For a family in a rural region, the loss of a single wooden structure or a grain storage facility to a termite swarm isn't just a financial setback. It is a catastrophic loss of stability, a blow to food security, and a setback to generational wealth. We are living in a state of constant, invisible friction with the empire. Every time we drive a nail into a beam or lay a floor of polished oak, we are engaging in a high-stakes economic gamble. We are building our wealth out of the very substance that the empire is programmed to recycle. In the grand ledger of the planet, the termites are simply reclaiming what they believe is theirs, leaving us to foot the bill for the most efficient, most relentless redistribution of wealth the natural world has ever known. But what if we were to win? What if, through some miraculous technological feat, we could finally declare total victory and erase the termite from the face of the earth? It sounds like a triumph, a world free of the silent thieves that hollow out our homes and drain our economies. But in the grand, interconnected ledger of the biosphere, such a victory would be a death sentence. To understand why, we must look past the destruction of our floorboards and toward the very foundation of life itself. We must look at the concept of the great recycler. In the natural world, there is a fundamental problem. Life is incredibly efficient at building complex structures, but it is remarkably poor at dismantling them. When a forest falls, when a giant hardwood tree collapses under its own weight, or when a landscape is carpeted in dead vegetation, that organic matter represents a massive reservoir of locked-away energy and vital nutrients. Without a way to break that matter down, the world would quite literally become a graveyard of undecomposed wood. The cycle of life would grind to a halt, choked by its own waste. This is where the empire becomes indispensable. Termites are the primary engines of decomposition in many of the world's most productive ecosystems. They are the biological equivalent of a planetary recycling plant. While fungi and bacteria play their roles, termites are the heavy machinery. They possess a specialized, symbiotic toolkit, a cocktail of gut microbes and protozoa, that allows them to perform a feat of chemical alchemy, the breakdown of cellulose and lignin. Lignin is one of the most complex and resilient organic polymers on the planet. It is the glue that gives wood its structural strength and makes it nearly impervious to most forms of decay. For most organisms, lignin is an impenetrable fortress. But for the termite, it is a feast. By breaking these molecular bonds, termites unlock the carbon, nitrogen, and minerals trapped within the dead wood, releasing them back into the soil in a bioavailable form. This process is not just a cleanup service, it is a massive nutrient pump. As termites tunnel through the earth and process organic matter, they facilitate a process called bioturbation. They physically move nutrients from the surface deep into the soil horizons, aerating the earth and creating microhabitats for beneficial bacteria and fungi. This enriched soil becomes the nursery for the next generation of flora. Without this constant, subterranean stirring, the soil would become depleted, nutrient-poor, and eventually sterile. Furthermore, we must consider the carbon cycle. Termites are massive players in the global movement of carbon. By consuming dead plant matter, they regulate the rate at which carbon is sequestered in the ground or released into the atmosphere. They are a vital gear in the Earth's climate-regulating machinery. If the empire were to vanish, the forests would stop growing. The soil would lose its fertility. The massive accumulation of dead biomass would not only create a physical barrier to new life, but would also disrupt the delicate chemical balance of our atmosphere. We would find ourselves living on a planet that is literally choking on its own history, a world where the dead refuse to become the living. The very creatures we view as our greatest architectural adversaries are, in reality, the silent guardians of our planet's continued existence. But if these tiny architects are the guardians of our planet's life cycle, what happens when the very climate they have spent millions of years mastering begins to shift beneath them? For eons, the termite empire has thrived on stability. They are masters of the microclimate, capable of maintaining a precise, steady temperature within their mounds regardless of the chaos above. But as global temperatures climb, the thermal buffer provided by their earthen cathedrals is being pushed to its breaking point. We are witnessing a profound and unsettling transformation. The empire is not just reacting to a changing climate, it is being forced into a frantic, high-stakes evolution. As the world warms, the metabolic rate of a termite accelerates. Like most ectotherms, their internal biological clock is dictated by the temperature of their environment. In a warmer world, they eat faster, grow faster, and reproduce more rapidly. To a casual observer, this might look like a triumph for the species. But this metabolic surge comes with a hidden, deadly cost. A faster metabolism requires a vastly higher caloric intake. As the thermal baseline rises, the empire must consume exponentially more resources just to maintain its current population. This puts an unprecedented strain on the surrounding vegetation, potentially turning these essential recyclers into voracious agents of ecosystem depletion. Even more critical is the delicate dance of moisture. Termites are, essentially, hydraulic engineers. Their survival depends on a precise moisture gradient within the soil and their tunnels. As rising temperatures increase evaporation rates and alter rainfall patterns, the subterranean world faces a dual threat: catastrophic desiccation or sudden, overwhelming flooding. When the soil dries out, the empire's ability to transport nutrients and maintain their soft, vulnerable bodies is compromised. We are seeing evidence that some species are being forced to dig deeper and deeper into the Earth's crust, chasing the receding moisture line, effectively abandoning the surface layers they once managed so effectively. Yet there is a darker, more complex phenomenon at play: the expansion of the frontier. As temperate zones warm, the thermal barriers that once kept termite colonies confined to the tropics are dissolving. We are seeing a massive, northward migration of the empire. Species that were once geographically isolated are now encroaching into new territories, bringing with them a sudden and aggressive shift in local ecology. This isn't just a migration, it is a biological invasion. These climate refugees are entering ecosystems that have no evolutionary experience with their level of consumption, potentially outcompeting local decomposers and disrupting long-standing nutrient cycles. Furthermore, warming temperatures are altering the very chemistry of the termite's gut. The symbiotic microbes, the microscopic engines that allow them to digest lignin, are themselves sensitive to heat. If the temperature within the colony exceeds a certain threshold, the delicate microbial balance can collapse, rendering the termite unable to extract energy from the wood it consumes. It is a biological paradox. The very heat that fuels their growth may eventually starve them from the inside out. The empire is at a crossroads. They are an ancient, resilient lineage, but they are now facing a challenge that moves faster than the slow, rhythmic pace of evolution. As the climate shifts, the silent architects are being forced to redesign their world in real time, proving that even the most successful empires are never truly safe from the changing winds of the world above. If an empire is defined by its ability to solve problems, does it require a king or merely a consensus? In the human world, intelligence is often viewed as a solitary spark, the genius of a single mind. But beneath the soil, the termite empire operates on a different, more profound logic. They possess what biologists call swarm intelligence, a phenomenon where the collective behavior of a group emerges from simple, local interactions, creating a sophisticated, decentralized brain that no single individual could ever comprehend. There is no general directing the construction of a mound. There is no chief engineer overseeing the ventilation shafts. Instead, the intelligence of the termite is distributed. It is a liquid consciousness flowing through the colony like a nervous system made of pheromones and touch. When a worker encounters a breach in a wall, it doesn't wait for an order. It releases a specific chemical signal, a molecular instruction, that recruits others to the site. This is not a command. It is a localized data point. As more termites arrive, the concentration of the pheromone increases, creating a feedback loop that scales the response to the magnitude of the crisis. This leads us to one of the most startling revelations of modern entomology, the concept of the superorganism. In a termite colony, the boundary between the individual and the group begins to blur. An individual termite is relatively simple, driven by a limited set of instincts. But when thousands of these units interact, they exhibit emergent properties, complex behaviors that are not coded into any single insect. They can solve multivariable mathematical problems, such as finding the shortest path to a food source through a labyrinth, or optimizing the structural load of a dome, all without a central processor. Recent studies into stigmergy, a mechanism of indirect coordination, have revealed that termites use the environment itself as a shared memory. A pile of dirt left by one worker acts as a physical stimulus that tells the next worker exactly where to add the next grain. The architecture itself is the blueprint. The mound is not just a home, it is a physical manifestation of the colony's collective thought process. But this collective consciousness is not merely a tool for construction, it is a survival strategy that defies the limits of the individual. In a swarm, the error of one insect is corrected by the wisdom of the many. If a single worker wanders into a lethal trap, the colony does not mourn, it recalibrates. The loss is treated as a minor fluctuation in a massive, self-correcting algorithm. This raises a haunting question for our own species. We have spent millennia perfecting the centralized hierarchy, the CEO, the president, the commander. We believe that intelligence must be concentrated at the top to be effective. Yet, the termite empire has thrived for over 150 million years by doing the exact opposite. They have mastered the art of the distributed mind, proving that true power does not lie in the strength of the ruler, but in the seamless, unthinking coordination of the many. They teach us that intelligence isn't about how much one knows, but about how effectively the whole can act as one. But what happens when this decentralized, self-correcting intelligence collides with the most advanced, centralized intelligence on the planet? For much of human history, our relationship with the termite empire was one of blissful ignorance. We built our civilizations of wood and paper, unaware that a silent, microscopic army was calculating the structural integrity of our very foundations. But as our cities grew, so did the scale of the conflict. We entered a state of perpetual, invisible warfare, an endless technological arms race where the prize is the very ground we stand on. Initially, our weapons were blunt. We used fire, heavy chemicals, and physical barriers. But the termite superorganism is a master of adaptation. When we introduce a toxin, we aren't just fighting an insect, We are fighting a biological algorithm that can sense a shift in the environment. This led to the era of baiting, a psychological game of deception. Instead of attempting to kill the colony instantly, which often triggers a defensive stress response and causes them to relocate or harden their defenses, we began to use their own foraging logic against them. We create slow-kill bait stations laced with insect growth regulators like hexafluorin. These chemicals don't kill the termite immediately. Instead, they disrupt the molting process, preventing the insect from growing its exoskeleton. Because of their social structure, the workers unknowingly carry this molecular sabotage back to the heart of the empire, feeding it to the queen herself. We aren't just killing individuals, we are attempting to crash the colony's operating system. Yet, the termites have begun to fight back through evolutionary resilience. In many regions, we are seeing the rise of behavioral resistance. Some colonies have developed the ability to detect the presence of certain chemical baits, triggering a collective avoidance response that renders our most expensive technologies useless. They are essentially patching their own vulnerabilities. The race has moved from the backyard to the laboratory. We are now seeing the advent of smart termite detection, using acoustic sensors and thermal imaging to listen to the vibrations of their movement through walls, or using satellite imagery to track the moisture shifts that signal a hidden infestation. We are trying to use high-tech surveillance to catch a ghost. But even as we develop more sophisticated neurotoxins and AI-driven detection, the termite holds a fundamental advantage. They do not need to innovate, they only need to persist. While we spend billions of dollars on research and development to protect our infrastructure, the termite empire relies on a blueprint that has been refined over 150 million years. They do not need to invent a new way to eat wood, they simply need to find the next piece of it. As we move deeper into the age of synthetic biology and nanotechnology, the question remains: can we ever truly win a war against an enemy that doesn't think, doesn't fear, and doesn't stop? We are building higher, faster, and more complex structures, but we are doing so atop a foundation of living, breathing, and highly adaptive intelligence. We may be the masters of technology, but in the quiet, dark corridors beneath our floorboards, the termite empire is proving that sometimes the most effective technology is the one that has already survived the end of the world. If a single termite is a simple creature, then what is a colony? Is it a collection of individuals, or is it something else entirely? A single, massive, multi-bodied entity. To understand the termite is to confront a profound question in biology and sociology. Where does the individual end and the collective begin? When we look at a termite mound, we aren't looking at a building inhabited by residents. We are looking at the externalized anatomy of a superorganism. In this micro-universe, the concept of self is an illusion. In human society, we rely on centralized authority, governments, leaders, and hierarchies to coordinate movement and resource allocation. But the termite empire operates on a principle of radical decentralization. There is no general in the soldier caste directing a charge, nor is there a manager telling the workers which tunnel to dig. Instead, they utilize what scientists call stigmergy. This is a mechanism of indirect coordination where the trace left in the environment by one individual serves as the stimulus for the next. A worker doesn't need to see its neighbor to know what to do. It simply senses the chemical signature of a half-finished wall or a moisture gradient, and its instinctual programming compels it to complete the task. They are essentially a biological distributed computing network, solving complex structural problems through trillions of tiny, local interactions. This brings us to one of the most unsettling lessons the termite teaches us about organization: the total erasure of the individual for the sake of the whole. In a termite colony, the ego is non-existent. This is most evident in their sacrificial behaviors. We see workers that will physically plug a breach in a nest with their own bodies, or soldiers that, when wounded, will undergo a form of programmed cell death to prevent infection from spreading to the nursery. They possess a socially regulated apoptosis, a biological suicide triggered not by injury, but by the needs of the collective. Furthermore, their social cohesion is maintained by a sophisticated, chemical democracy. While the queen is the reproductive engine, she is not a dictator in the human sense. The colony's stability is actually maintained by a delicate balance of inhibitory pheromones. If a queen's egg-laying slows, the chemical signals shift, and the workers instinctively respond by altering the colony's nutritional intake or even accelerating the development of new alates. It is a real-time chemical feedback loop that maintains homeostasis without a single command being issued. This level of integration challenges our very definition of intelligence. We often equate intelligence with the ability to reason, to plan, and to individualize. But the termite suggests a different kind of brilliance: swarm intelligence. It is a form of non-cognitive problem-solving that allows a group of mindless insects to achieve feats of engineering that rival our own. They manage complex ventilation, precise thermal regulation, and intricate foraging routes, all without a single brain being capable of grasping the big picture. As we look toward the future of human organization, from the way we design autonomous drone swarms to the way we structure decentralized digital networks, the termite stands as a silent, ancient mentor. They remind us that the most resilient systems are not those governed by the strongest leader, but those where the intelligence is woven into the very fabric of the interaction itself. The empire doesn't think, it is the thought. But if this collective intelligence is so pervasive, so deeply woven into their very biology, how has it managed to endure through the most violent chapters of Earth's history? To understand the resilience of the termite, we must look back through the layers of deep time, far beyond the reach of human memory. While the rise and fall of human empires are measured in centuries, the termite empire is measured in hundreds of millions of years. They are not merely inhabitants of the world, they are survivors of its most cataclysmic reorganizations. Current paleontological evidence suggests that the ancestors of modern termites emerged during the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs. While the giants of that era were carving their names into the fossil record, the early termites were already perfecting the art of the subterranean siege. They have endured the fragmentation of the supercontinent Pangaea, the radical shifts in global humidity, and the sudden, violent transformations of the Earth's atmosphere. Most remarkably, they have navigated the gauntlet of the Big Five mass extinctions. When the Chicxulub asteroid struck the Earth 66 million years ago, triggering a global winter that choked the life out of the terrestrial giants, the termite empire did not crumble. While the surface world descended into chaos and starvation, the termite found sanctuary in the one place the fire and the darkness could not easily reach: the soil. Their survival during these extinction pulses is no accident. It is a direct result of the very traits we have just explored. Their ability to regulate their own microclimate allowed them to weather extreme temperature fluctuations. Their role as decomposers meant that even as entire ecosystems collapsed, the termite had a feast of decaying organic matter waiting for them. In a world of scarcity, they are the ultimate opportunists of the dead. But their longevity isn't just about hiding, it is about evolutionary flexibility. We see this in their specialized endosymbionts. A termite's ability to survive is inextricably linked to the microscopic protists and bacteria living within their guts. These microbes are their biological insurance policy. When the flora of the planet shifts, when a lush rainforest gives way to a sparse savanna, the termite's internal microbial community can adapt, allowing them to extract nutrients from increasingly difficult sources. They have essentially outsourced their survival to a microscopic alliance that evolves alongside them. This creates a profound paradox. We often view mass extinctions as the great resets of life, moments where the biological slate is wiped clean. Yet, for the termite, these moments were merely shifts in the landscape. They possess a temporal continuity that is almost incomprehensible to us. They have seen the continents drift, the oceans rise and fall, and the very air change its chemical composition, all while maintaining the same fundamental social architecture. The termite empire is a testament to the power of the decentralized system. Because they do not rely on a single, fragile point of failure, they are nearly impossible to extinguish. You can kill a king, and a kingdom falls, but you can kill a billion termites, and the superorganism simply continues its work, emerging from the cracks in the earth to reclaim the ruins. They are the ultimate witnesses to the history of our planet, a silent, unbroken lineage that has outlasted the dinosaurs, the ice ages, and the very mountains themselves. They are not just surviving the timeline, they are the timeline. What if the most complex civilization on Earth isn't one we can see, but one we have spent our entire history walking over? As we descend from the epic scale of deep time and the violent shifts of geological eras, we return to the present, to the immediate, crushing reality of the soil beneath our feet. We often think of the ground as a static stage, a solid foundation upon which the drama of human life unfolds. But to look closer is to realize that we are walking upon a living, breathing, and highly organized crust. Beneath every step, there is a frantic, rhythmic, and mathematical precision that defies our traditional understanding of intelligence. The complexity of the termite empire is not found in a single brain or a central command, but in the emergent properties of the swarm. It is a phenomenon known as stigmergy, a mechanism where individual termites respond to changes in their environment, such as a pheromone trail or a pile of dirt, which in turn triggers further action from others. They do not need a blueprint. The blueprint is written in the very act of building. This is a decentralized intelligence so potent that it achieves feats of engineering, thermal regulation, structural stability, and resource management that our most advanced algorithms still struggle to replicate. Consider the sheer scale of their hidden labor. In certain parts of the African savanna, the collective biomass of termites can rival that of the largest mammalian herds, yet they occupy a space so narrow, so intimate that they remain virtually invisible. They are masters of the microniche, utilizing specialized biological tools like the masticatory ability to process lignocellulose, a substance so tough it breaks down the teeth of most animals, turning the very skeleton of the forest into a foundation for their cities. Even their sensory world is a marvel of evolutionary refinement. While we rely on the broad spectrum of light, the termite operates in a sophisticated tapestry of chemical and tactile signals. They sense the world through vibrations in the earth and the subtle nuances of molecular sense, creating a high-definition map of their environment that exists entirely in the dark. They are living sensors, constantly monitoring the moisture, the temperature, and the chemical signatures of their neighbors. This brings us to a humbling realization. As we look toward the future, navigating our own technological revolutions and environmental crises, the termite stands as a silent mentor. They have solved the problems of sustainability, social cohesion, and climate control long before humans ever mastered fire. They remind us that true power does not always lie in the individual, but in the seamless integration of the many into the one. As we conclude this journey through the dark, we must change how we perceive the world. The dirt is not just dirt, it is a sprawling metropolis. The forest floor is not just debris, it is a highly regulated industrial zone. The termite empire is not merely a biological curiosity, it is a parallel civilization, an unbroken thread in the fabric of life that has been weaving its story since the dawn of the dinosaurs. They are the silent engineers of the earth, the eternal recyclers, and the hidden masters of the underworld. And as long as there is decay, there will be the empire, unseen, uninterrupted, and utterly profound. How long can a civilization last before it is forgotten by history? For humanity, history is a fragile record of stone, ink, and digital bits, all vulnerable to the ravages of time. But for the termite, history is not something that is recorded. It is something that is lived, breathed, and physically constructed, one grain of soil at a time. As we pull back from the intricate details of their biology and the brutal mechanics of their warfare, we are left with a profound truth. The termite empire does not merely exist within the environment. It is an integral part of the Earth's very metabolism. They have achieved what no human empire has ever managed: the perfect, uninterrupted continuity of existence. While human civilizations rise in a burst of glory and collapse under the weight of their own complexity, the termite empire operates on a principle of radical resilience. They do not fight against the entropy of the world, they harness it. They have mastered the art of the circular economy millions of years before the term was coined. By breaking down the lignocellulose of dead forests, they facilitate a massive, global nutrient loop, ensuring that death in one part of the ecosystem becomes the literal foundation for life in another. They are the silent janitors of the biosphere, performing a service so fundamental that if they were to vanish tomorrow, the world's carbon cycle would grind to a catastrophic halt. What is truly staggering is their evolutionary endurance. While the dinosaurs faced a sudden, violent extinction, the ancestors of the modern termite survived the Great Dying, the shifting of continents, and the ice ages. They did this not by changing who they are, but by perfecting who they are. Their success lies in their lack of ego. There is no individual glory in the mound, no singular genius to be toppled. When a queen dies, the biological imperative of the swarm triggers a replacement. When a soldier falls, the chemical signals of the colony instantly reorganize the workforce. They are a collective organism, a superorganism that perceives threats and opportunities not as an individual, but as a singular, flowing consciousness. Even as we move into an era of unprecedented climate volatility, the empire shows no sign of faltering. They are already beginning to shift their ranges, migrating and adapting their subterranean microclimates to meet the warming temperatures of a changing planet. They are, in many ways, more prepared for the future than we are. So, as we step back into our own world, look down at the ground beneath your feet with newfound reverence. That patch of dry earth, that fallen log, that seemingly empty forest floor, it is all part of a vast, interconnected, and incredibly ancient machinery. The empire is not waiting for us to discover it. It has already accounted for us. It has survived the rise and fall of mountains, and it will likely witness the quiet end of our own era. They remain the silent masters of the underworld, a testament to the power of the small, the many, and the persistent. The cycle is eternal. The empire continues, unseen, undefeated, and utterly inevitable.